This video is brought to you by Fallen Dominion Studios. Check out their website at fallendominionstudios.com. So what I think of Wreck and Ruin? Really? Are you kidding me? Hey there folks, welcome back to the Dice Odyssey. I'm Kaz, and today we're going to be talking about another post-apocalyptic game that's coming out on Kickstarter pretty soon, Wreck and Ruin. Now this game is for 2 to 4 players. It's by Dream Big Games. Mark Mckinnon is the designer. It goes for about anywhere between like an hour and a half to maybe close to 2 hours. This game is all about taking a fleet of, post-apocalyptic rigs and vehicles of all different types, each one having their own strengths and weaknesses, and strategically and tactically figuring out how you're going to go out and salvage different spots out in the wastes, at the same time battling other vehicles. I mean, it's a straight vehicle combat game. Think of like Death Race 2000 except without the race, or a Demolition Derby. That's what it feels like sometimes. But anyway, this game's going to be coming out pretty soon. Let me go ahead and get you over to the table, just give you an idea of how it plays, and I'll get you back to my final thoughts. All right, I'm going to give you a quick general rules overview on how to play Wreck and Ruin. Ultimately, this is a pre-production copy of the game, so any of these rules are subject to change. We're not going to cover every single rule that's in the actual rule book currently, and we're just going to give you an idea of how to play in general, because there's quite a few rules in this game. We've got the play area set up for a 3-player game. Each player is going to take their fleet of vehicles. They're going to have their own set of dice that's matching those colored vehicles. You've got your salvage deck right here. You've got an event deck, and you've got extra tokens, which are like for salvageable areas, which is basically the main point of the game. You're trying to gain the most amount of points through salvaging these different areas on the map. And if you notice, these salvage icons, these tokens here, are double-sided, the green side and the red. Okay, the red side basically signifies that they have not been salvaged yet. They're open to somebody coming over and trying to take them. Okay, it's going to be, in general, the setup. Each person's going to receive 1 salvage card each. Now each player is also going to receive a faction card. Now there's several factions in the game, but for example, there's 4 different types of faction cards per faction, and each one's going to have a special ability on it. Look at this as like your nuclear warhead. This is the game changer. If you are in a bind, this thing probably will turn the tide in your favor somewhat. You're only going to get 1 of these, okay, and they're going to normally be randomized, so you can only use these once. So these are the strategic things you're going to want to wait on to use until absolutely necessary, right? You're also going to receive the Wastelander's Guide. This is basically a player board that helps you understand vehicle size, movement, attack, armor, damage points, and special skills that each vehicle has, okay? Then it gives you some more details on things like full throttle and the crash and burn mechanic. When a vehicle basically is defeated or destroyed in battle, if it's going to keep rolling, is it going to explode in place, things like that. You got the round tracker down here, and you got a bullet icon that basically points to the round that you're on currently, okay? First round, there's not going to be any event cards turned over. The event cards are basically just modifiers to the round that kind of add different things, different situational elements to the round. You're also going to receive a stack of 5 action point tokens. It basically signifies if you've taken an action or not, because each round you're going to get 5 available actions to you, and you have to flip this over every time you use an action. That's basically what that's for. You also got these little flame things here that signify when a vehicle's taking damage. Now in the game, when it comes to actions that you take, your vehicles all have a 2 action point limit. Now the actions that correspond to that are, for example, moving your vehicle, okay? You can't move a vehicle twice in the same turn, not under normal circumstances. Same thing goes with attacking a target within range, ramming an adjacent vehicle, which is quite fun, by the way, or searching a wreck for salvage. So, for example, if you have a vehicle out on the board that has completely been full of holes in terms of flames, and it's destroyed on the board, somebody rammed it or shot it up to death or whatever happened to it, you can actually go adjacent to this thing somewhere on the board and actually search this joker for salvage. And when you do that, you're able to pull a salvage card. Now, the following actions that don't go against your 2 action point limit would be searching the area for salvage. Literally, as long as you have active vehicles on the board, you can go, okay, I want to search wherever. You don't have to point out a specific area. You just say, I'm searching. And you use an action, and you pull a salvage card out, and you might get something cool off of it, right? You can also attempt to repair a wreck. One of the biggest things in the game is going to be your buggy here, who is your main repairer, but there's also other ways that you can repair wrecks in the game that don't necessarily have to do with the buggy, okay? And also another one is bringing a vehicle back on the board. If a vehicle has been completely and utterly destroyed and it has somehow been taken off the board somehow, then you're able to spend an action and possibly bring it back on the board. So that's another thing that you can do. Now, just to give you an example of movement, when you want to take a move, the only ones that aren't going to correspond to this rule are these scouts, these little motorcycles here. They can kind of move how they want to, but any other vehicle that you've got has certain kinds of movements it has to take. So the way to actually use movement points, if you notice the buggy's facing a specific hex direction, they move with 6 movement points itself, like the buggies do. Each vehicle's got its own amount of movement points. But if I want to move, say that direction, okay? Well, for each hex facing, each time I turn within a hex, it counts as a movement point. So for example, each time I hit a facing, that's 1 movement point. That's 2. See, I've only turned the vehicle, but that still counts as movement points. Now, if I want to continue going, I can go, okay, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, I didn't have to move that entire amount. I could have stopped, but that's basically how movement works. Now, the big rig's a little bit different. When you get that on the board, that's going to move from the back end, right? And that's how it's going to turn. It takes up 2 hex spots, and it takes 1 hex at a time, just like that. Now, each vehicle is going to have its own strengths and weaknesses, so to speak, but just to give you an idea, the wrecker, this joker is awesome at literally wrecking people, okay, just like it sounds like. It is an armored, muscle-bound grotesque that destroys everything in its path, okay? The buggy is good, again, for healing people, okay? As a matter of fact, all these are listed on the player board. The scouts have the ability to do what we call a pot shot, okay? So while they're driving around or while they're riding around, they're able to shoot at people as they continue to move, right? In the middle of movement. And then the big rig here is just awesome. It can shoot 360 degrees around it, whereas everybody else has to shoot, for the most part, within a firing arc that's kind of in front of and slightly on the sides, which comes into play when it comes to combat later on. One other thing about movement is you can actually attempt a full throttle, and what that means is you're going to add more movement points to your actual current movement ability for each vehicle. So, for example, if you wanted to move the wrecker, its normal movement is 5. You can roll a die. Oh, that stinks. But, well, basically, you see I got a 1, so that wasn't fun. You're going to take a vehicle size here, which is 3, okay? And you're going to deduct whatever it is that you rolled, the size from whatever it is you rolled on the die. In this case, I only got a 1, so basically I would get nothing, but no matter what, you still always at least get 1, no matter if you rolled terribly. So instead of moving 5, I can actually move 6 now. And the same goes with any of these. It works the same way. Now, when it comes to attacking, you're going to look at different vehicle sides. Like, for example, the back and most of the side here, you can't attack from unless you're a big rig with other vehicles, I should say. But if you're firing, for example, like your weapon, if I want to attack this wrecker with this wrecker here, this guy has to be within 3 hexes of his firing arc, which basically extends 3 out and kind of around somewhat to the front here. It shows you in the rule book, but basically he's in the firing arc. And so basically what you would do is look at the attack value, for example, the wrecker. And in this case, the wrecker he basically is going to roll 2 dice. And what's going to happen is you're going to look at the armor value of the one you're trying to attack. And you're going to, which is a 5, which is pretty high, meaning I have to get a 5 on this die and a 5 on this die or higher to actually do damage against his armor. And one other cool thing is anytime you roll a 6 in this game, pretty much for just about anything, I think, you actually get another free roll. So not only does this count as an attack or I'm sorry, a successive hit, you get to re-roll it again, right? So if it had been a 6 again, I could continue to keep rolling it. Now, ramming in this game is something you're going to be doing quite a bit, actually, with many different kinds of vehicles except for the scouts, because they can't do anything. The wrecker is probably the best thing in terms of ramming, because it has a special ability called steamroll, and you can read about that on the rule book, but it's pretty fun. But what you're going to do is you're going to actually now look at your vehicle's armor value, and you're going to compare it against the vehicle that you're trying to hit's armor value. Okay, and then you're going to also add in size comparisons and things like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to roll the number of dice according to your armor value, which in this case, if it was this wrecker against this one, it's 5 dice. Now again, I have to get the number on the die, on each individual die, that counts against that armor value, which is another 5. So for example, if I rolled that, I've got 2 6s right now, and then I've got a 4. Oops. I got a 4, 3, and a 2 according to that. And so these dice don't matter because they weren't enough against this one's armor. But these 2 dice not only hit him twice, that means that's how much damage I'm going to do when I actually ram the guy, which, right? But at the same time, I can now re-roll these if I want and see if it did any more damage. And no, it didn't. So that's basically how ramming works. Now, there's different modifiers, depending on if you hit them from the side and things like that. What happens when you actually damage a vehicle to the point of being destroyed? Well, number one, you're going to add this black flame in there showing that it is now destroyed. It's not an orange flame. It just shows that it is done. You can't use it anymore currently, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to look on the back, and it's called the crash and burn. And you're basically going to roll die, okay? And whatever happens according to the die roll, it's going to make the vehicle do something specific. So, for example, if you rolled a 1, the vehicle explodes, and it can cause splash damage to other vehicles around it, which is pretty hilarious. And then at the same time, if it didn't do that, it might, let's say this is out of the way for a second. If it didn't do that, then if you rolled something else, it shows you on here what the car or vehicle will do according to what happened. But if it explodes, for example, it's off the board automatically. Or if it crashes and burns and just goes straight forward off the board, it's still considered off the board. And then later on, there's a possibility of bringing it back on the board with another action with one. Let's say it goes back over here. Let's say the person brought it back on the board over here. Then it's back on the board in its setup area with 1 HP left, meaning it's severely damaged. So a chance to actually continue repairing it, but as it stands, it's still, you can use it again. It's just going to be severely damaged. So that's how you bring a vehicle back on the board. Now, when it comes to salvage spots, how you're going to get those is once you actually have a vehicle stop on there, at the start of the next player's turn, any of these that have a vehicle occupying them, that means they are going to go ahead and be flipped over to green, okay? And that means that you currently own that, and you're beginning to salvage it. Now, you're going to get this as long as during the next player's turn, you do not take 1 single point of damage while that next player is playing. At the end of their turn, if you didn't take any damage, you get that salvage token, and that becomes a victory point for you. It comes off the board, and then at that point, a player rolls the dice, and however many of those that were taken off the board, you go ahead and you determine, according to the round tracker, where the next salvage token is going to go. I mean, it could go over here, go anywhere on the board according to what the round tracker shows you, because it's according to the dice, and it tells you that in the rule book. Now, a couple things I want to cover real quick before we're done is that these areas here are what you would call impassable areas, and they also block line of sight, the red areas, okay? And these things are double-sided, so I mean, they're going to be different usually on each side. But if you have areas like, for example, the orange areas, they're normally impassable, but they don't block line of sight, so you get actually fire on somebody. And then again, of course, the rule book will explain other things as you go. But in general, that is going to be how you play Wreck and Ruin. Once you've played all the rounds that you're going to play, first person with the most victory points is the winner.
Contest the bottom line!
What do I think of Wreck and Ruin? Really? Are you kidding me? Go out and back this game. If you like Mad Max demolition style stuff going on, you know, where you're basically taking vehicles and just, you know, ramming them into each other and firing on each other and having to strategically move your vehicles into different places to support other vehicles and destroy others. This game's amazing for that, okay? For what it is currently in prototype form, I really, really liked the production quality. Now, when it comes to artwork, the artwork on the faction cards is pretty good. I really, really like the just the whole feel of it. Like each faction has their own feel anyway. For example, these guys, they operate in high technology, the Ruin Army, and the artwork for them is phenomenal, okay? It kind of reminded me and other people at the table of like the Halo style look, right? You've got the Reapers who basically all they operate in is wanting to attack people, right? Each faction's got its own strengths and weaknesses in that way. The board was, to me, it was more functional than it was popping and flashing, right? It is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, so I wasn't expecting like, you know, cheery bright colors, but I don't know, I wish it had been just a little bit more popping off the board, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you're not really noticing that too much because you need that functionality to be the way it is, because you need to know, okay, I can't, you know, do line of sight through this impassable area, or I can do line of sight, or I need to be able to quickly differentiate where the salvage places are out there on the board. So I can kind of understand why they went with the more blandish, you know, post-apocalyptic wasteland look to it. The other thing I really liked was the design of the models, okay? Now, I was kind of hoping each faction would have a model. For example, let's say these big rigs, that they have different kinds of models for each one, you know. Hey, that could possibly still happen. You know, it's a Kickstarter, things can change. There's always like, you know, possibilities of stretch goals and things. So we'll just have to see what happens, right? Each model, for example, the scouts, each one of these are going to be good for different functions, right? The scouts are great at moving really fast. They're little motorcycles. They're good at moving really fast. I love the pot shot action where you're able to, you know, fire at people as you're driving by, right? And you might not take damage because they might not be able to return fire if they move far away on your turn. I really like that, especially when it came into play. I had a friend of mine who might have possibly won the game the other night when we were playing. He actually was sitting on a salvage spot and he was about to claim it, and he had just kept on attacking me all game. And you know who you are if you're watching this, brother. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and go all out. I don't care if I win at this point. I'm going to destroy him. And so I took one of my little scouts out there and I drove it past him, because remember, if you're on a salvage spot, if you watch the overview, if you're on a salvage spot, it's basically like a king of the hill kind of thing where you're holding it until the end of that other player's turn, and if you don't take damage, you gain that salvage spot and that becomes a victory point for you. Well, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of that, so I took my little guy and I came by and I pot shot at him. I actually landed the shot and it stopped him on the final round of the game from being able to claim that spot, right? So I love that. I mean, that just makes me happy because you're able to do so much. And now when it comes to, you know, firing your weapons and attacking, that's pretty straightforward. It's all dice, you know, and you have to, you know, determine armor stats and things like that. I think my favorite couple of aspects to this game, honestly, were the ramming, man. You have that wrecker out there that is just a beast, right? And it goes in and it just steamrolls people. Now, I really love the fact that on the player board, it even says that special ability of that wrecker was to steamroll people when you ram them, right? I love the mechanics in this game when it comes to the ramming. I mean, being able to determine armor for armor and trying to decide whether or not your armor is going to be able to outweigh their armor and destroy them. And at the same same time, you also take in the size of the vehicles to determine whether or not you're going to push them back and things like that. Just so much good thought was put into the mechanics in this game. Now, I also really, we had some of the most hilarious things happen. Really loved the crash and burn mechanic, you know, where if you destroy a vehicle, you know, it's got all the little flames coming out of it and such. If you actually destroy a vehicle, you get to determine, basically, it was like, it's almost like it's death throws. Think of a Mortal Kombat finishing move.
Finish him!
But it's like it does it itself, you know. You have to roll the dice and see what you get in terms of what's going to happen on the back end. Is it going to continue to move forward? Because again, the game is simulating that these guys are all all being mobile almost all the time. So it's like you're having it's like Road Warrior, right? Like Mad Max Road Warrior combat, where you're sitting there hitting each other, bashing into each other, shooting at each other, and then if you blow that other one up, it might still keep going, but it's already blown up. You know what I mean? I loved the idea that if you, for example, rolled a 1, boom, you blow up right where you are, and it's like basically like a little nuclear warhead, because there's splash damage to all the people around you. So you might have other vehicles around you that could, you know, take damage. So yeah, it was very well thought out, the mechanics in this game. Now, let me go ahead and hit just a couple of the negatives, and it may not be a negative for everybody, I'm just being honest. This game's not necessarily going to be for everybody. Let's just be honest about that. It's going to have a ton of dice rolling in it, and some people may or may not like the luck factor, because there's a ton of luck in it. Now, you can mitigate it a little bit with the salvage cards. It's really another thing I do like. The salvage cards come out, and you might be able to augment some abilities of your vehicles. You may be able to turn the tide of the game with salvage cards. We had so many times where somebody was about to do something and somebody stopped them, maybe didn't stop their whole action, but stopped a salvage card specifically from being played, because they had a counterbalance to that. They had a counter card to it, and that made it so fun, right? It almost felt like a take that in that way, like a reverse take that, you know. So again, but with the amount of luck in the game, though, this might turn some people off who don't like a lot of dice rolling in. But for people who do, for people who want, you know, a fully throated post-apocalyptic experience in the sense of car vehicle combat, this game's amazing. And I like the idea also that they kept the victory point thing very simple. They had you more focus in on just grabbing those salvage spots mainly to get victory points, and they focused in on the vehicle combat so much and made that so well fleshed out that if you're into that kind of thing, I really think you're going to love this game. I really love the idea of putting flames in the actual peg holes. I love the be able to show that physical damage in a game. I've always been like, you know, if I wanted to play, you know, like Wasteland Express or any other post-apocalyptic game, if it had you know, like vehicles on the board or something like that, I always was like, man, I would have loved to see the actual damage being dealt to the vehicle, right? And in this game, they do that, and they do it very well. But I will say that it was a little fiddly to sit there and keep trying to put these little flames in. You know, sometimes you'd have to stand up or pick your vehicle up off the board, try to remember where you are. Putting flames is a little fiddly. Once in a while, because of the delicate nature of it, you might have one or two fall out. But in general, they hold pretty well. But like I said, that's a minor quibble. And I love the faction powers. Absolutely love the faction powers. I like the idea that there's so many of them that they're randomized that you don't know what you're going to get in any game. You just when you choose a faction, you got 4 different ones to choose from, right? And you're going to only be able to use that once, and that may be the game changer for you. That might actually turn the tide of battle. It really made the game more fun for me, right? I love those heavy swings, especially if you're losing, that you just happen to have good cards. And again, that tends to add a little bit to the luck factor, just depending on what cards you draw. But the faction abilities are amazing for that. I can't say enough good about this game. I had so much fun with it. We laughed so much. We wanted to play it again, like right after we played it the very first time. And yeah, go check this thing out on Kickstarter. If any of this sounded fun to you, if you could understand where I'm coming from, taking your own fleet of vehicles like Mad Max, going out into the ways, salvaging spots, destroying your enemies, and just coming out on top, it's a very satisfying experience. I can't give it a higher recommendation than that. So anyway, thank you so much for watching the Dice Odyssey. And hey, have you checked out any post-apocalyptic games in the past year or so? Have you played any games that sound like this, right? Does this sound like it's right up your alley? I really, honestly, we went in with no expectations to this game, and it thoroughly surprised me. And thank you again. Please like and subscribe and check us out on Facebook and Twitter at the Dice Odyssey. And I mean, we put up reviews pretty regularly, and so we thank you. You have a blessed day, and game away.